I was in at the beginning of the Vietnam era, 1962-63. I volunteered for the draft to get it over with, basically. And during my basic training is when my training division was transferred into an infantry division that would later go to Vietnam. So I was basically, without my knowing it at the time, in a unit that was slated to go to Vietnam. And the company that I was in, companies are about 150 people perhaps, I found out later lost 37 people in Vietnam later, in the late 60s and early 70s. So it took heavy losses. In my time, it was peacetime. Vietnam was good duty. I'm a Vets for Peace. I'm also in the American Legion, which might seem a contradiction, but my basic passion is the Veterans for Peace. The war, in my opinion, had no good end. I have two brothers who were retired officers who were both in Vietnam. Both came home alive. But I've seen all sorts of casualty stories from friends of mine, people that I knew, and as I just said, 37 people in my company 6 years later died over there in combat. So I don't see war as having any good end. It's just a continuation of a bad story that's gone on for centuries. Actually, I wasn't. I was too busy making a life at the time. I was a widower with an infant son, so I didn't have much time for other than just to get along with life. And I became active in what I would call anti-war, pro-peace stuff after 9/11. It's very frustrating because we seem to be oriented to war. I don't know if it's a part of human nature, but we just seem to have an orientation to conflict, and leaders sort of stoke that conflict with people like ourselves. It's sort of difficult. My one other experience that I had, I said I came in right at the beginning of the Vietnam era. By strict coincidence, in November of 1982, I happened to be in Washington for a meeting, just a meeting, and I had a delayed flight home to Minneapolis. And that happened to be the very day that the Vietnam Memorial was dedicated. So I went down there, I had a chance to see that, and that was a raw, emotional time, I tell you. Lots of people there, and I didn't know that it was happening till I happened by it. I'd like to say get rid of war. I know we won't get rid of war, but to understand that war has huge consequences that are negative for both winners and losers. That's my message. That's my message.